Ukrainians finally reportedly took under fire control Svatove Kreminna road. At the same time, Ukrainians in the south started crossing Dnipro river, and reportedly in one single strike, Russians lost more than 500 soldiers. And knowing that the situation is getting pretty desperate for them, Russians are now strongly and seriously considering opening the front line in the north, but for a very different reason that you might think. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first satellite image comes to us from Makiyivka, where you remember yesterday a whole pretty much military base of Russians was destroyed. And as you can see, it is pretty much non-existent right now, and according to both sides, Russian and Ukrainian, the losses are estimated to be anywhere between 50 and 600 respectively. And today, believe it or not, we started receiving some heavy coping from the Russian propagandists why and how this happened. And one of the most ridiculous reasoning is that in fact not a single Russian soldier was affected. In reality, what Russian propagandists claim is that the cell phones of the Russian soldiers were taken from them, placed inside this military barracks in Makiyivka, and this confused the Ukrainian reconnaissance, which resulted in HIMARS attacking the empty building. And I'll leave it totally up to you whether you want to believe it or not. Next we go to Bakhmut, and as you can see from this video, the mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, visited the front lines and met with Ukrainian soldiers. Next we go to Drushkovka, located to the south of Kramatorsk, and today the hockey arena Altair has been destroyed by Russians. According to the Russian side, as a result of this attack, more than 90 Ukrainian soldiers have been eliminated. And I mean, yes, it makes sense that attacking the empty hockey arena at night inflicts much more damage than attacking literally the military headquarters. And in order to prove their point, the Russian propaganda gives us this video, which shows the inside of the arena and approximately 100 of slightly burned mattresses, which were mysteriously unaffected by the explosion wave. I'm sorry I had to blur this video, because in the past YouTube was demonetizing my videos for much smaller reasons. And for those interested, here is the picture of this hockey arena before the attack. Next we go to Novy Oskil, located in Belgorod region, Russia, where reportedly Ukrainians were able to destroy a military object of Russians. And since we do not have the official comments by the Ministry of Defense of Russia, most likely it was something significant. And then similar loud noises have been reported in Kursk, also Russia. As both countries continue to attack each other pretty much every single day, it is the effectiveness of Ukrainian air defense system which constantly increases. Such as, for example, according to this statement by President Zelensky, who mentioned that in the first 2 days of this new year, Russia launched more than 80 drones, and Ukraine was able to intercept all of them. And I mean, Russia obviously also want to give its propagandists some good news, that they are also relatively successful at destroying Ukrainian military equipment. And for example, right here we have a table which shows how many times Russian propaganda mentioned that they were able to destroy Ukrainian HIMARS versus actual number of HIMARS delivered to Ukraine. And as you can see, Russians reported that they were able to destroy 27 HIMARS, while in fact Ukraine only received 20. Well, as long as common sense of Russian propagandists is as bad as their math, I guess this will work. So, pretty much, yes. Not the very first time Russian propaganda gave us something ridiculous, and I'm pretty positive it will only get worse from there. And if you want to hear some ridiculous Russian propaganda in the near future, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and force me to post some stories, so that you can, I guess, see how I live. Alright, and now let's really quick talk about the updates from the east and this statement that Svatove Kreminna road is finally under fire control by Ukrainians. And first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians continued their attacks against the same Svatove Kreminna road after a tactical pause, but all of them were unsuccessful. And at the same time, right now, Russians are more actively than ever are redeploying personnel and military equipment to this Kharkiv-Siversk front line. Speaking about this massively important highway between Svatove and Kreminna, according to the head of Luhansk region, Sergei Haidai, Ukraine was able to finally take it under fire control. And first of all, it basically means that Ukrainians are now severely disrupting the logistics of Russians in this area. And then, as soon as Ukrainians are able to establish the full control over this highway, this is exactly when the next directions for the liberation of the next settlements, such as Starobilsk, Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, becomes open for Ukrainians. And luckily, Ukrainians did not have to wait long enough to take the advantage of this fire control. Because once again, according to Sergei Haidai, they were able to destroy a military warehouse of Russians located near Svatove. As we go down a little bit more to the south, to one of the key cities, Bakhmut, Bakhmut still stands. And according to the sources from the inside of the city, both countries are doing the artillery and aviation strikes against each other pretty much every single day. But unlike Ukrainians, the forces and the equipment of Russians is depleting and the effectiveness of their attacks reduces fast. And ultimately, Russians continued to try to advance next to Bilohirivka, Rozdolivka, Solidar, Krasnohora, Bakhmut, Kurdyumivka, Avdiivka and Marinka, but all of these attacks were successfully repelled by Ukrainians. And now let's take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control. And first of all, as you can see right here, unfortunately, Russians brought their front lines closer next to Krasnoyarichinske. Going more to the south, we can see that Ukrainians advanced further to the north of Bilohirivka and Russians advanced closer to the south of this settlement. Going to the city of Bakhmut itself, we can see the changes in the front line, which are relatively successful for both sides. And speaking about Bakhmut, right here I have a video about the current condition of this city, which also shows several street fights, but due to ongoing YouTube demonetization, I had to blur this video. For this reason, I uploaded some of today's uncensored footage for free on my Discord, and the rest will be available on my Patreon. And if you want to financially support the channel, the links will be down below. Alright, and now let me give you a very quick similar update from the south, and talk about more than 500 Russians being lost as a result of one single attack. And first of all, according to the same report, Russians continued their relocations and the construction of defense structures both in Zaporozhye and in Kherson regions. At the same time, the work of Russian air defense system has been reported in Jankoy. And then pretty much the same events have been reported in Sevastopol and in Simferopol, as you can see from these videos. In the meantime, unfortunately, Russians continue to routinely shell Kherson city, and in response to that, thanks to HIMARS, Ukrainians destroyed yet another military base of Russians located in Pravyi Sahi. But Ukrainians did not stop here, and according to the General Staff of Ukraine, they launched another attack against a cluster of Russian forces located in Chulakivka, and as a result of this, it is estimated that approximately 500 Russian soldiers were lost. But wait, that's right, there is more. Because as you can see from this video, Ukrainian soldiers were able to install their Ukrainian flag on Veliki Potemkin Island. As you can see right here, this information has been confirmed by the Deep State map, and as we zoom out, we can see that this island is located strategically between the northern and the southern part of Kherson region. And I mean, yes, it might not seem much, but every major liberation always begins with small victories like this. Being on this island allows Ukrainians to attack Russian positions much easier, collect the intelligence data much more effectively due to closer proximity, and in the future, whenever they cross Dnipro river, they will only need to cross this small part. Which pretty much means, in the best case scenario, I still hold on to my prediction that Ukrainians will be fully crossing Dnipro river from Kinburn Spit, from Kakhovka region, and then additionally from Veliki Potemkin Island. And as soon as this happens, I expect the liberation of the southern part of Kherson to be as quick as its northern part. As you might already know, and this has been perfectly said by the Chief of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, Russians in the east, and especially in the south, are pretty much deadlocked. And it is only Ukraine which will benefit from this stalemate in the near future, primarily thanks to support by the Western countries and their weapons. And that is why Russians are now strongly considering opening another front line in the north. And to be honest, I personally do not know with which forces or weapons they are going to do this, but at least this is what it seems. Because according to the chief of Kharkov garrison, Sergei Melnik, Russians might attempt to advance to Kharkov to separate it from Kiev, and at the same time they might also invade to Rivne. And the main reason for this new offensive against both these cities might be a little bit different from what you think. Because allegedly the Kharkov front line is supposed to stop Ukrainians sending reinforcements to the east, and the Rivne front line is supposed to prevent Western countries from sending their weapons into the country. And I mean, at this very moment it is pretty uncertain, to say the least, how Russians are planning to open a brand new front line when they're struggling so much in existing ones. That is why it is assumed that even 200 proposed soldiers might not be enough to fulfill this mission. And in case Russians decide to proceed with this, as they think, carefully calculated decision, they will most likely have to announce another round of a mobilization, about which we were talking in my previous video. But luckily for Ukrainians, and unfortunately for the fresh Russian conscripts, they'll be poorly trained against Ukrainians who are battle-hardened veterans. The Ukrainian military intelligence even forecasts that over the next 4 to 5 months, the losses of Russians can be as much as 70,000 people. But I mean, unfortunately, when did it stop the Russian government? And according to different Ukrainian authorities, such as Danilov, Reznikov, Kuleba and Zaluzhny, this full-scale invasion can begin as early as January, but most likely no later than in March. And my personal assumption, in case this does happen, this might occur on February 24th, because we already know how much Putin loves symbolism. And speaking about this potential mobilization, the Soldiers' Widows of Russia mentioned that this mobilization will be the salvation. Their whole statement basically goes as following. They asked Putin to close the borders, to announce the full mobilization, and to create anti-retreat unit, which main purpose will be to eliminate those Russian soldiers who do not want to go into attack. And yes, I know that this might be a fake news, but it might very well be an intentional fake, or how we call it in Russian, vbros. And the only goal of this vbros will be to emotionally prepare the people of Russia in case something similar indeed happens. As you can see, in the next couple of months, with high degree of certainty, some major events will start happening. And if you don't want to miss any of these updates as soon as they start happening, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. And if you want to financially support my work due to ongoing demonetization, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where you'll receive early access to the additional content. You can find all the other useful links to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.